Hello, and welcome to the Winter Story Lab Showcase. My name's Eva Marie. I'm with the Sanger Leadership Center, and thank you all for joining us for our finale event of the academic year. We have 2 nights of compelling storytelling in store for you. And tonight, you're going to hear from 6 courageous students who attended our Story Lab retreat this past February and have been refining their stories ever since. Now, tomorrow, also at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, tune in to hear a whole new batch of student storytellers. Now, these storytellers, they put a lot of thought and effort into their stories, and we can't wait to invite them to our virtual stage. But before we do, I want to tell you a bit about the program. Now, at its core, Story Lab is really about 2 things: developing the powerful leadership skill of effective communication and strengthening an inclusive community. Story Lab helps participants really harness the power of storytelling to communicate with impact, form stronger connections, and bring people together. So as humans, we've been using storytelling to effectively share ideas, beliefs, values from one generation to the next for centuries. And whether it's been around the campsite or the dinner table, stories really bring us together. And they also give us agency for self-authorship and help us make better sense of the world around us. So after a year that's been filled with what may have been previously unimaginable challenges, our stories will be powerful tools of inspiration and influence as we move forward. And so as listeners, a story is really an invitation to get curious, absorb new perspectives, and be present. So as you listen today, we hope that you can immerse yourself in each one of the stories. Now, today's showcase and the Story Lab program as a whole is brought to you in partnership with the Design Plus Business Club. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Anisha Kapoor, who is the Story Lab co-chair with Design Plus Business, to share more about what the program means for her. From that student perspective. So please help me in welcoming Anisha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anisha Kapoor, and I'm a first-year MBA student at the Ross School of Business. I've been involved with Story Lab for the past year through the Design Plus Business Club here at Ross, and I'm so excited to be here with you all today. Through my education and professional life, I've learned the importance of storytelling. Stories can help you relate, empathize, and learn from others' experiences and values. I do want to thank the Sanger Leadership Center for all their hard work putting Story Lab together, and the Wolf and Heron team for helping our storytellers shape their stories and strengthen their storytelling skills. Lastly, I want to thank each and every storyteller for being vulnerable and sharing their stories with us. They've put in a lot of hard work into their stories, and I'm so excited to hear them. With that, I want to hand it back right over to Eva Marie to kick us off.
All right, thank you, Anisha. Now, before we jump in, let's cover a few housekeeping items. You'll notice that closed captioning is available for tonight's program, so you can toggle that on and off by using the CC button down below. Second, you'll notice that the chat feature is enabled. And during the storytelling portion, which we're going to get to in just a moment, we welcome you to use that chat box to share messages of encouragement and affirmation for our student storytellers. And community support is really key part of Story Lab. So we trust that you're going to leave thoughtful and positive messages for our storytellers. So we certainly welcome that. Now, today's presentations are going to cover a variety of topics and themes, and to really ensure that we are providing a safe and inclusive space for everyone, before each story, look out in the chat, because that's where we're going to be sharing the themes for each story in advance. So if anything sounds like it might be distressing for you, feel free to step away as needed and return for the next one. So if you have any questions about tonight's event, feel free, don't hesitate to directly chat us, and we're happy to answer any questions you have. Okay, so if you have been to a Story Lab event in the past, you will know that we like to set a few ground rules before jumping in. So here's what that looks like in this space. Number one, what is shared at Story Lab stays at Story Lab. So, what you're going to be hearing today is personal and really help us respect the confidentiality of our storytellers. Please don't discuss the particulars of stories outside of this space. Secondly, like I mentioned, we certainly encourage shout outs in the chat. All of that is welcome. So please be engaged throughout the experience. It really takes a lot of courage to get up on this Story Lab stage and share personal aspects. So we encourage you to use that chat feature to really show your excitement and support and gratitude for our storytellers. Next, please be present and listen fully. Close out other windows you might have on your computer right now, silence your phones. Really take this as an invitation to be fully present. Don't let all those other outside factors enter into this space. This is really for you to have this full present moment. And listening is an active skill. So we encourage you to please engage with it. And then last but not least, adopt a growth mindset. You're going to be hearing from 6 different students with 6 unique life experiences. So as you listen, get curious and really think about what new insights might you gain from this experience. So thank you all in advance for helping us create a community of care for our program today. And now, without further ado, I would like to welcome our very first storyteller.
All children have heroes. These heroes serve as an aspirational anchor, an anchor of how they see themselves and who they hope to be. These figures can either be fictional or non-fictional. When I was growing up, I didn't really have that. All the other boys looked up to Superman and Spider-Man and NSYNC and the Founding Fathers as proof of their own superhuman capabilities. I just didn't have that. Girls were able to see themselves represented as Joan of Arc or Eleanor Roosevelt, or these super fun, super beautiful, super engaging princesses with excellent hair. While these princesses aren't perfect, they serve as proof that they can grow up to be powerful and beautiful. As everyone else found their heroes, I really couldn't figure out who mine were. I didn't see myself as Spider-Man or the Backstreet Boys or as Eleanor Roosevelt. I didn't see myself as a Disney princess no matter how hard I tried. I never really found myself in any of the TV or books or characters that I was being fed. And I couldn't quite tell why, but nothing felt right. That is, until I turned 16 and went to see the musical Rent with 2 of my friends. So I know what you're thinking. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, another homosexual who loves musical theater, groundbreaking. But stay with me for a minute. At that point, I knew nothing about this play. It was before my musical theater phase had started, which is never ending, and I walked in blindly. For those of you who don't know, Rent is about a group of queer people who essentially squat in a warehouse apartment in New York City. It's during the height of the AIDS epidemic, and the characters are dying from a virus that the government has still not stated exists. This story may seem bleak, but for me, it was a revelation. I remember watching and feeling this intense feeling of joy deep down in my stomach. The songs they sang rang out like a siren and will forever be ingrained in my psyche. I got lost in the songs, the music, and most importantly, the characters, specifically the character of Angel. So, Angel is a larger-than-life, exuberant, poised, 6-foot-tall drag queen who unfortunately dies halfway through the play. She and her boyfriend Collins sang these beautiful love songs about how meaningful their time together was. Their love for one another was devastatingly emphasized by the fact that their health was rapidly declining, but that was not a reason to mourn. It was instead an opportunity to be alive and love the things and people you love wholeheartedly, fearlessly, without shame. It felt so right. It was so precious and happy and warm and like kind of hot. And I loved every part of it. My poor parents had to listen to me scream that soundtrack on repeat for months after leaving that theater. They'll be all right. I still remember the warm shiver that would run up my spine when Collins and Angel sang in harmony. That was the first time I ever saw queer Black people fall in love. It was before I even started to understand my own sexuality, but I knew that what I was seeing was meaningful. I got to experience these fictional queer Black characters embrace every part of themselves, and it was so meaningful for me. Fast forward to now, I am 30 and in grad school. This time in school has made me think about my education as a whole. I've been thinking a lot about what information was taught to me and what images I was shown. I realized that over the course of my 17 years in school, I have never studied any queer Black people. I was never shown their artwork or their contributions in the history books. It's like they didn't exist. This omission had its intended effect. As I reflect, I can barely name 10 queer Black icons who have contributed to our cultural and historical landscape. This causes me profound sadness. I reflect on myself as a 16-year-old, searching for a hero, searching for a guide, looking for some sign that I'm not by myself. And I think about seeing those images from Rent and how it made me feel. How the joy I saw on screen led to a feeling of belonging and home that was pivotal in my growth as an individual. As you reflect on your own life and heroes and the history you were taught, think about who was excluded. Put yourself in my shoes for a moment and consider what life would have been like without any representation or proof that your experience was beautiful or meaningful or worthy. I've started my own re-education. I've been doing research to find out more about the Black queer fictional and historical figures who were excluded from my education. And with each new tale of their magnificent lives and heroic stories, I can't help but ask myself, who would I be if I had known their stories as I was growing up? What would have happened if I had heard that Black lesbian writer Audre Lorde once said, "Nothing I accept about myself can be used against me to diminish me"? What would have happened if I'd heard that Black gay filmmaker Marlon Riggs once said, "My struggle has allowed me to transcend the sense of shame and stigma identified with my being a Black gay man. Having come through the fire, they can't touch me"? If I'd heard these words, would I be bolder, maybe stronger, perhaps more confident? I don't know, but I do think that their inclusion would have made a difference for me. I think these topics have been particularly top of mind because I have two young nieces. So one is 6 and the other is just over a year old. Side note, their names are Naya and Naomi, and my name is Nathan. It's so cute, right? Okay. So anyway, Naya and Naomi are Black girls facing a similar problem. The history of Black women has largely been ignored, and they are seen as spectators in the history books, not as legitimate contributors. Smart, capable, beautiful Black women are portrayed as the exception, when in my experience, it's been all that I've seen. As I watch my nieces grow, I see them consume media that doesn't look like them, that doesn't affirm them or their history, and it breaks my heart. Right before my eyes, I can see in real time as they try to reconcile the images in front of them with the images they hold of themselves. I see them and remember exactly how complicated and odd that experience can be. I want them to never feel that sense of shame or confusion that I used to feel. I don't want them to be ashamed of who they are or what they look like I was. I don't want them to waste time like I did trying to change themselves or hide themselves or be someone different. Even when I look in the mirror now as a 30-year-old man, I can still hear the familiar voices that whisper to me that I'm not deserving, that I'm not smart, that I'm not beautiful. Grappling with this language has been a profound waste of my time, and I'm reclaiming my time both for myself and for my nieces. I want them to know that what they offer is incredibly unique. I want to take every moment I can to remind them that they are from a long line of Black icons who have made incredible contributions to this world, and that these contributions are permanent proof and a constant reminder that the parts of themselves that they think are ugly or undesirable or odd are actually what makes them magnificent and so incredibly powerful.
Everything felt slightly different. From the off-ice warm-up routine with 23 new girls to tying my brand new skates while listening to an actual quality sound system and not a boom box we had to buy on our own and throw in the corner of the locker room. I was in red and white versus royal and silver, But one thing brought me comfort, and that was seeing my older sister, Missy, across the locker room from me, which I had seen since I was 8 years old when we first started playing hockey in Minnesota. I hit the ice and I had never been so nervous to play hockey. It was my first collegiate ice hockey game. I was what they call starting or on the first line as a freshman. So after literally shaking in my skates on the blue line during not only the national anthem, but then also the Canadian national anthem, I took the first face-off for our first game of the season against Harvard. My legs shook and I probably missed 5 passes before I finally started to feel comfortable. 10 minutes into the game, the puck was a foot in front of my stick and I reacted. Then I saw the puck in the back of the net. I think I blacked out because I can't really explain what happened next, but the 4 other girls on the ice grabbed me so tight, my head was pressed into someone's jersey. And if you don't know me, I'd say I'm on the smaller side for college hockey. We skated to the bench to knock the rest of the team as they jumped up and down, yelling my name. And everything came back into perspective when I saw Missy sitting down on the bench behind the rest of the team, looking lost. The person that I knew was the most proud of me in that entire arena was sitting down. I could even see my parents who had come to New York for my first game up in the bleachers looking down, looking concerned, as if they knew me scoring would be a problem. Missy had never started a game before, and not only didn't have a career goal, barely got the chance to play. This seems so odd because Missy was my best friend growing up. We had the same friends, we went to the same schools, played on the same sports teams, and were truly inseparable. We always thought that we were so similar, young sisters not knowing enough about the world and one another's complexities, assuming we would be this close forever. I spent my early college years attempting to balance my hockey career, my professional career, my classes, which I knew I wasn't doing a great job transitioning into after I was placed on academic probation after my first year and had to go to mandatory study hall with the other girls on the team who also couldn't get their act together. I fell in love. I made new friends. As a Midwest girl, I was exploring New York and planning trips on the East Coast once hockey season was over. It was halfway through my sophomore year when Missy texted me, asking me to hang out, something that I welcomed and cherished, always. But instead, I felt a sudden rush of anxiety. It was very evident that I felt smothered. But what was I smothered by? She was my best friend and my sister, and I cared more about her than anyone. That same winter, we were driving back on the team bus from an away game when Missy opened up to me. I had gone to the back of the bus to check on her because our coach didn't play her that weekend. She didn't even dress for the game. And I remember sitting on the bench between shifts, looking up and seeing Missy sitting alone, drinking her coffee like she always had. But this time, to my surprise, she was watching the game motionless and emotionless. I wanted to check in to make sure she was doing okay. And when I got to her seat, she had dark circles under her eyes, and she was soaking so much that the back of her head was halfway down the seat. I asked how she was doing, and Missy communicated to me that she was unwell and had been experiencing self-confidence issues leading to harmful behavior. I knew she had been struggling with depression and anxiety since high school, but never in a million years thought that this was something that she was dealing with. All along, I had been avoiding her and not understanding how she could care about me so much, but still have such a hard time showing me that she was proud, especially when it was so easy for all the other girls who had known me for only a few years versus 20 to show their love and support. I didn't process this right then and there, but I remember not being able to feel anything else but guilt. Meanwhile, we spent the rest of Missy's senior year either fighting or apart, as she handled these emotions alone. She barely graduated because of everything she was going through. And then her and I spent 2 years apart, not saying a word to each other. About 3 years ago, Missy and I tried to reconnect. She came to DC where I was living at the time, just for a weekend. And it didn't take more than a lunch for us to be fighting again. And by that night, barely talking. So she left the weekend early to go back to Boston. We tried to text about our issues. We FaceTimed to catch up casually, but we only fought more, said meaner and meaner things, and spent more time apart when I knew deep down she needed me the most. But about 8 months ago, I booked a flight to Minnesota for a weekend, something I was both so nervous and so anxious for. I would be staying at Missy's apartment. As the weekend got closer, I got more and more anxious, actively thinking of ways I was going to tiptoe around her to avoid any and all confrontation, just so we could get through the weekend. I landed in Minnesota and we embraced each other like we always had in those first moments of reconnecting. Our first and our last hugs at the airport were always drastically different, and that's if a goodbye hug even existed. But again, everything felt slightly different. Conversation in the car felt lighter, it felt easier. I couldn't help but think it was only a matter of time until she flipped that switch and I would accept that it wasn't her fault and things would never go back to how they were. The first night stayed light and easy until right before bed, when I noticed Missy's anxiety heighten. But I gave her space, tried to stay out of her way. It wasn't until the next morning when Missy and I had what I would honestly call a revolutionary conversation. She had made her routine coffee and smoothie and doubled her portions so that I could be in that routine with her. And that's when she opened up. She maturely communicated that her anxiety had gotten worse, and the past few months had been so bad that she had taken a leave of absence from work. She was really excited that I was there, although anxious. We talked for hours that morning. It actually felt physically different, like I felt different in my bones. The entire conversation represented the adult relationship that I had been longing for with her. But we were finally both there, both wanting this progress. We were still emotional, but we stayed rational. We had grown up just the right amount to have a conversation that would help us move forward together. I have visited her more now in the last 5 months than I have in the last 6 years. We've had honest conversations. We have laughed, we have cried, and we've been able to, at 27 and 29, find a level of respect and understanding, but also a feeling of comfort that we felt when we were 7 and 9. I put in the work to learn about what she was going through, accepting that we were different people, and was finally open to approaching the relationship with more effort while releasing the expectations I had for her and had once had for her when I was a little girl. We were trying to meet each other in the middle on this beautiful journey of sisterhood, and we're finally on the right track.
I cannot remember exactly when it started. I know it was sometime in 2018. But as at then, I thought that the feelings I was experiencing were mood swings. Coming from a country where mental health issues are not given as much attention, it was difficult. Not that people do not care, But a lot of people are either not well informed or do not know what to do. I fell into the category of people that were not well informed, so much so that I could not identify that I was depressed. I started the MBA program and, well, let's just say it started getting worse, to the point where it started becoming unbearable. The anxiety attacks became more frequent. There were a lot of times I felt like there was just this weight pressing on me that I couldn't breathe. My sleep got worse. I was averaging about 3 hours of sleep at night, and even within these 3 hours, I woke up multiple times. Of course, I was on another time zone, but that was not the reason. I had headaches throughout the day, little motivation to do anything. My attention span was very low. I would be in class and just not know what is going on. Being around people was exhausting, and I was having a lot of negative thoughts. In one of our classes, we learned about attribution bias, self-serving bias, where if someone does something good, they feel like it's by their own internal abilities and less as a result of external factors. It was strange because at this time, it was kind of the opposite for me. When good things happen to me or when I achieve something, I feel like, did someone pity me to give me this? Am I someone's charity case? Because I don't deserve this, I shouldn't be getting this. That was a very terrible place to be in. I doubted every single thing I did. It was very difficult for me to make decisions. It takes me forever, and I would just prefer someone else makes them for me. I was in a bad place, but I kept on going and kept on ignoring it. At home, I kept to my room away from family and friends with the excuse that I was busy with schoolwork. But in reality, I just hated being around people. My head keeps exploding with a lot of degrading and negative thoughts. I had suicidal thoughts, a lot of them actually. I thought it would be a good escape, and I had a lot of opportunities. But what held me back was the thought of how it would affect my family, my boyfriend. These are people that have always been there for me, made sacrifices for me. They're like my cheerleaders. I wasn't going to hurt them by committing suicide. So because I still wanted to die, I started to pray for natural death, accident, something, anything that would kill me and it wouldn't be my fault. It's continued on like this. One particular day, I had the worst anxiety attack ever. And for someone that wanted to die, it was very scary. I grabbed my laptop and I sent an email to Julie Kaplan. For those of you who may not know, Julie is one of the counselors at CAPS dedicated to Ross students. In my email, I explained how I was feeling and practically asked her for help. She responded and we scheduled a meeting. When I met with her, we discussed about what I was feeling, how I was feeling, why I was feeling the way I was feeling, and what I could try to feel better. It was really nice finally talking to someone. I felt like the weight actually reduced, like I could share some of the burden with her just by having that conversation. We started meeting regularly every week, and I used to look forward to our meetings. Every other day I feel like crap, but the day we meet, there's some sort of happiness I feel. One day I was speaking with one of the CDO peer coaches, just talking about recruiting and my challenges with coffee chats and all. And towards the end of the call, he asked me, "Is there anything else?" And I told him, "I'm struggling with depression." He paused, looked at me and said, "I also struggled with depression and anxiety." In my head, I was like, no way. You mean you were like me and you turned out like this? This is someone that I admire a lot for his confidence and charisma. It was just so hard to believe. He went on sharing his experiences with me, some of the things he did to cope, shared some resources with me, and kept on checking on me since then. The next time I met with Julie after this conversation, I remember asking her, Julie, do you see people fall very deep into depression, come out of it? And she said, yes. There are people who do come out of it, and you just notice by the light in their eyes and their positive energy. So I was like, okay, that means I can do this. All this while, I thought this was something I had to deal with for life. This was something I just had to keep on managing. But if you say there's an out, then I want out. And so I decided to take charge. I doubled down on my coping mechanisms, started to spend more time with my family and friends, started to go out, started to deliberately appreciate life. In the past, I used to listen to the negative voice inside my head and try to ignore it. But now I started talking back to that voice. Like, I hear you, I feel you, but I'm in charge now and I love me now. That was it. That was my out. I met with Julie again earlier this year and she said, I can see that light in your eyes. I still struggle sometimes, but I dare say I'm living my best life.
When I was 14 years old and my brother was 13, I went to Yellowstone with my family. Here, we marveled at nature's beauty and stayed in various parts of the park. For our last couple of nights, we stayed at the Old Faithful Inn, where one of Yellowstone's most famous geysers is located. At this point, the only person close to my age that I talked with was my brother. And although we got along all right, I desperately wanted to be around other people after listening to 10 days of him rambling on and on about which superhero was better. When we got into our hotel lobby, it had a cabin-like feel with wooden floors, glossy wooden walls, and wooden chairs. As I scanned the room, I noticed a girl sitting by herself in a wooden chair located at the far corner of the room from where I stood. She looked around my age, and I was drawn to her, both in my desperation to meet new people and a sympathetic desire to keep her company. She leafed through a book with a bored, lonely air. I wondered, should I talk to her or just wait for another person my age to come along? What if she ends up being my only opportunity to make a new friend my age? My brother can get annoying, and she looks really kind. The way she's half smiling as she's reading makes me think she's nice. While my parents and brother were at the check-in desk, I snuck over to her corner of the room and mustered up the confidence to say, "Hi, I'm Jack. What's your name?" She told me her name was Hineke, which I could not pronounce at first, but she kindly repeated it as I was eager to say it right. The initial fear I had felt about approaching her dissipated instantly, and before I knew it, we were sharing everything. She started talking about the different things to do in her town, her siblings, and her friends at school, which inspired me to do the same. 5 minutes later, and it felt like we had known each other for 5 years. During that short conversation, we established that we were more alike than not, despite the fact that she was from the Netherlands. We both played musical instruments, we were in fact the same age, and we shared passions for being curious, loving nature, and seeking friends on our own ages while traveling. We were in the same situation that day, trying to avoid the younger siblings who haunted our steps. I was eager to continue talking with her. My parents had stuff planned for us, so after they finished checking in, I had to say goodbye to her. I gave her my phone number and we met up again the next day at the same wooden chair she sat on the day we met. Her siblings joined her, so I got the chance to meet all of them. It was Hineke's last day at Yellowstone, and although I had only known her for 2 days, it was hard to say goodbye. Fast forward to the present, and we've been snapping and texting for 6 years straight. Just before COVID hit, she FaceTimed me for advice about a guy who had asked her to a dance. It turned out that they had both liked each other for some time before he approached her and asked her out. Hineke has always been focused on school, so when it came to her first date, she was incredibly nervous. "This is amazing," I told her when she told me. "Just be yourself. You're already great friends, so you've got nothing to be afraid of. He knows you. He likes you. Go have fun." "You're so right," she muttered. "I just have to be myself, and it's going to be okay." She said it almost like a mantra, as if repeating would make it happen. The next day, she snapped me asking for a FaceTime. That night, we talked face to face, and I saw the biggest smile I had ever seen on her face. Do I even need to ask how it went? Giggles erupted from her as she managed to say, "It went so well. You were right. I was myself, and it was perfect." I told him how nervous I was, and he actually admitted that he was too. And then he kissed me. We both squealed. Despite COVID and the geographic distance between us, I consider Haneke one of my closest friends. Moments like the one in which Haneke and I became instant friends are beautiful. They can be big or small, and sometimes we don't know which until we examine them years later with the wisdom garnered by age. Sometimes we push small moments aside, assuming the opportunities will come again. But if I hadn't mustered up the confidence in that tiny single moment to say hi, then Haneke would never have been a part of my life. It's the friends we make that truly give life meaning. I made a split-second decision to make a friend the day I met Haneke, and she's changed my life in so many ways.
As a sophomore in high school, I was being raised by my single mother in a rented apartment building, living off food stamps and child support. Life wasn't always easy, but we had each other, and my mom would always say, "Maya, you have such a bright future ahead of yourself." But then, on a dark, gloomy day, in the middle of January, in the middle of Michigan, my life changed forever. My mom comes to me that day with tears in her eyes, and she says to me, "Maya, I have to tell you something." Fear and just disbelief. Why would my otherwise cheerful, happy mother be crying right in front of me? I sat down, almost feeling like I could just sink, and an intense fear blanketed over me. I sat so rigid, bracing myself for what she was about to say. "Maya, I have Huntington's." And it was with that one sentence that everything changed. Huntington's disease is a rare neurodegenerative disease. It's caused by a malfunction in your DNA and essentially codes the neurons in your brain to decay over time. It's often described as having ALS, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's simultaneously. Symptoms typically present themselves during a person's prime working years, and it's oftentimes after they've started a family. In my family's case, my grandmother had Huntington's, and as a family, we've had to watch the disease progress in her to the point of her not being able to walk or talk or even eat. It was that same year that my mom found out that my grandmother passed away. Since it's genetic, my mom's future was a simple flip of a coin, 50-50, whether or not she'd get it or not. And since she did, then that's me, 50-50 chance. I remember sitting there with all of these stats and stories rushing in my head, and I couldn't say anything. I absolutely choked up, and all I could do was embrace my mom with a heartache the size of a bowling ball in my chest. We sat there for such a long time, embracing each other, crying, comforting each other in the sense that I knew very well when symptoms began to appear, it would only be a matter of years that my mom had before she'd meet the same fate as her mom. And I imagine she held me so close and deep too, knowing that now my future is unknown. Despite everything, my mom has become an incredible role model, not only in life, but how to navigate life having a disease such as Huntington's. I remember it was my senior year. I was on the volleyball team and we had such a big game. I was rushing around the house trying to get everything ready to go. My backpack, check. Knee pads, check. Shoes, check. And as I'm rushing out the door, I turn to my mom. I say, "Mom, you really don't have to come tonight." I knew that walking had become increasingly difficult for her. And it was my fear that she would come and fall and I wouldn't be there to help. She just kind of gawked at me. She said, "Maya, of course I'm coming." And I remember arguing with her for a bit, mainly out of worry. But of course, it was pointless. My mom is a headstrong, optimistic woman who never misses a chance to be a part of a memory. And for that, I'm so thankful. I remember walking off the court, looking up to my mom in the stands, seeing her smile, clapping, proud of me, and recognizing in that moment that having her be a part of not only my life, but these memories served not only a huge purpose for her, but also for me. I'm soon to be graduating from the University of Michigan this year with a degree in business, honors, and a graduation job lined up for me. Although everything is virtual, I really found myself wondering, gosh, would my mom want to come? And that's the same sentiment that she had. Is that something really that you want me to be there for? And of course, something that she's just always taught me is to continue looking to the bright future, but living in the now. And to that, I said, "Mom, of course I want you to come."
I walk to the end of the table, triumphant, and hand my uncle a piece of matzah wrapped in a napkin that I found in the piano bench, and await my reward. As the youngest in my family, this is the special Passover tradition, finding the afikomen, that I get to partake in every year. He hands me $20 and asks me to sit down next to him so we can talk. I can't recall why the conversation went this way, but at some point he turned to me and said, "Alexa, what's your life plan?" Suddenly, tears well up in my eyes. I know how hard my uncle is on my cousins, and I don't have a good answer to give him. But they are in their late 20s. Right now, I'm 12. And my only life plan is to be a good soccer player and do well in school. Fast forward, it's Michigan Ross orientation, and I'm being asked to craft my odyssey, the epic journey of what brought me to Ross and where I plan for this MBA experience to take me. The perfect answer to the opening question of every interview, tell me about yourself. Tears aren't welling up in my eyes this time, but a similar feeling of discomfort arises. What's my life plan? I think to myself, why has my path led me here? I flash back first to the summer before my senior year of college, sitting at a desk in the Museum of Modern Art, making labels for binders, while works by some of my favorite artists, Matisse, Cézanne, Picasso, sit less than 50 feet away. It's the first time in my pursuit of a career in the art world that I think to myself, I love art, but I am capable of so much more than this. And more so, I couldn't seem to justify taking a job that was going to pay me a salary that could force me to ask my single mother, who had supported me my whole life, for even more help, after all she'd done to give me an amazing education. 2 years post-college, I am now in a hotel room in Batavia, Illinois, and excitement builds as this recruiter on the phone tells me this job is in Boston. I've been thinking about leaving consulting and moving to Boston for several months, and I cannot believe how perfect this company, role, but most of all, location is. I had been in a long distance relationship for a while at that point, and I felt like moving to Boston was really the next step I needed to take. And then I'm sitting across from an MBA 2 in my admissions interview for Ross and get asked, why business school? Why now? I've constructed an answer to this question, one that, is acceptable to give in an interview. But I know the answer behind the why is different than the one I'm sharing. It started with a crushing sense of disappointment that I felt in myself when that relationship I moved to Boston for ended. Not because the relationship itself was over, but because at some point I got lost and stopped listening to that inner voice that had guided me before. But when that heaviness lifted, my disappointment turned into a relentless, and I mean relentless, determination to make a change. Going to business school was not just about a career pivot or getting the business education I never did in undergrad. For me, it was simply a blank slate, the chance to reclaim control, and the opportunity to make space and time just for me. As you can probably guess, none of that is in my Odyssey. Instead, my Odyssey strips away the complexities, the raw emotions that drove me to make many of the choices that I did, and rationalizes those choices into a crisp career story. And that's why the Odyssey exemplifies one of the things I like least about business school. An overwhelming pressure to put us in a box, to make us so clearly define why we've done what we have and what we want to do next. Because if I'm honest, I've never really had one life plan. In fact, it's the moments where I've changed course that define my story. The moments where, with imperfect information about what would come next, I simply relied on my gut instinct to do what I thought was right. And I guess what's most ironic is that my next chapter after Ross is once again one of those moments. An unexpected opportunity that I honestly think will be more fulfilling than any of the things my Odyssey was designed to conform to. Recently, I sat with my uncle at that same table, and although in other words, he asked me once again about my plans for the future. This time, without tears or even that feeling of discomfort, I told him, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. We'll just have to see what happens.
Let's give a big round of applause for all of our storytellers. Thank you for being so brave, bringing your courage, your vulnerability to share such personal stories that truly enrich our community. We appreciate how much time and effort that you put into your crafting your stories to make this event a meaningful one. And if you haven't done so already, please put all that love and gratitude into the chat for our fantastic storytellers. And thank you for tuning in today. We hope that we will get to see all of you next year for our Story Lab kickoff that will be coming in the fall, where you'll get to learn more about how you can go through this process if you're interested. But in the meantime, we'd love to hear about your experience with today's event. So in the chat, you will find a quick feedback survey. I promise you it's quick. It's literally like 4 questions. So please give us the gift of feedback. And we thank you in advance for sharing. Okay. And as we wrap up tonight, we want to say a very special thank you to Steve and Karen Sanger, who make Story Lab and all of the Sanger program possible. So a big shout out and thank you to the Sangers. And then lastly, as we wrap up tonight, once again, thank you. Thank you to our storytellers. Thank you for the folks who tuned in. For those who are going to be around next year, like we said, we hope to see you in the fall. Congrats to those who might be graduating. And it's a beautiful day out. If you are tuning in Michigan, hopefully it's beautiful where you're at too. We hope that you can shut down your computer now, get outside, get off Zoom, practice self-care, be well, and have a great evening. Thanks all. Take care.